The ancient Indian texts mention beautifully decorated chariots or entire palaces called vimanas that could take off and, in a matter of seconds, fly away as far as space. Some people believe these vimanas only existed in Indian mythology, but it's also possible that they were based on a real technology that had been lost over the centuries. According to the Vedas, ancient Indian religious texts, there was the elephant vimana with several engines and many other types named after animals and birds. There was one for local travel, one for visiting different countries, and one for traveling to the moon and various planets. They could develop a great speed. One vimana had the superpower of invisibility. Another one was shaped like a sphere and was built on the winds produced by Mercury. This vimana was said to generate an enormous ray like the sun and make noise like the storm's thunder. All the vimanas were unbreakable and perfect for attacks on foes. Now, to operate a vimana, you'd need to know a lot of stuff, pretty much like today's airplane pilots, 32 secrets in total. They'd cover the aircraft structure and the secrets of taking off and maneuvering without crashing. That's a good thing. The pilot was also expected to know how to be seen and unseen, how to be hidden, how to be quick, how to manage contractions and expansion, and many other tricks. To hide the flying machine from foes, the pilot was instructed to move to the 8th atmospheric layer above the Earth and use the power of dark solar rays. This instruction might sound a bit weird, but there were others, more realistic ones, which still make sense in modern aeronautics. There are sections of ancient texts on the vimanas that focus on details like flight paths, pilot training, navigation, and even suitable clothes for pilots and recommended food for long flights. There was also a lot of technical detail about the use of heat-absorbing metals, the metals utilized, and melting points. The supporters of the theory that the vimanas were more than just myths are sure that the ancient Indians would unlikely go into all these details just for a beautiful story. So, the flying palaces might have been real and way ahead of their time, like many other great Indian inventions. Back in the 6th century BCE, an Indian physician named Sushruta basically wrote the original guide to medicine and surgery. They even called him the father of surgery for his work. Sushruta laid down the details on hundreds of medicinal plants and described complex surgical procedures. He gave instructions on nose reconstructions and skin transplants from one part of the body to another. The original method of rhinoplasty, which involved taking a piece of skin from the forehead to reconstruct the nose, is still used today. But back then, it had a slightly different purpose than surprising your followers on social media. Those nose jobs helped out folks who had lost their noses as punishment for crimes or in fights. Now, you gotta thank an ancient Indian math prodigy for the invention of zero. It might not seem like a big deal, but without it, we would have no binary system and no computers. People before the 5th century CE were only thinking about some sort of a sign to indicate nothing. The invention made addition, subtraction, and other mathematical operations a whole lot easier. You can see the oldest zero in existence carved in the wall of a temple in Gwalior, India. The Indus Valley Civilization was using rulers in 1500 BCE and earlier. Made from ivory, these rulers were found during excavations in what is present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. They were widely used in architecture with amazing accuracy. They had units corresponding to slightly over 1 inch that were marked with precise subdivisions within 5/1000ths of an inch. The next invention is more of a concept than a physical item. Standardization is all about setting the rules based on a bunch of people, things, or interests. One of its cool applications that we've all gotten used to is standard weights. Whether you're using pounds or kilograms, you need these universal measurements for weight, right? For this, we owe a big shout-out to the merchants from the Indus Valley Civilization who lived around 4,000 years ago. They were measuring everything from food grains to fancy luxury goods using these standardized weights. And their weights had decimal and binary mathematical systems going on. They didn't have high-tech gear. but they pulled off some serious precision using complex calculations and even sand for construction. Their art of standardization made its way to Persia and Central Asia, basically becoming the global weight-watching standard. So, if yoga is your go-to exercise, you definitely have a personal reason to appreciate the ancient Indian geniuses. Over 5,000 years ago, during the rule of the Indus-Sarasvati civilization in northern India, yoga was first mentioned in the Vedas. Yoga was refined and shaped over the centuries until it grew into a massive teaching with over 200 sacred writings dedicated to this way of obtaining enlightenment. At the beginning of the current era, yoga got a new trajectory thanks to a Hindu writer who laid down a system of yoga in his text, the Yoga Sutras. It became a whole-body rejuvenation, a life-extending practice with poses that you are still doing on the mat today. Yoga has reached the Western world only in the 19th century, and it caught on like wildfire. Chess, the all-time top game for intellectuals, is also an Indian invention. Its ancestor was called Chaturanga, and it was a strategic board game that started gaining popularity around 3,000 years before the current era. This early Indian version of chess was played by 4 people, not 2, and had 64 squares. Each player had 8 pieces, ranging from pawns to kings, bishops to knights, and there was no standard 6-faced dice. They rolled with an oblong one. Players facing off were actually allies, forming 2 teams based on the direction they sat. Chess, that we know and love today, was first mentioned in ancient Indian literature in a legend. It said that the wife of a villain called Ravana had invented the game to amuse him. Now, the word shampoo comes from the Hindi word, which means to soothe or knead. The substance was invented in India in 1762 and was originally used for head massages, hence the name. The first shampoo was made of natural oils and herbs. British traders fell in love with the idea and brought it back with them to England. It took years for the original head massage oil to evolve into shampoo as we know it today, but it's still an Indian invention. Unlike the ancient Greeks, who wore animal skins, the Indians started cultivating cotton back in the 5th and 4th centuries before the current era. They used cotton threads to produce fabrics that soon became a huge hit in the Mediterranean and beyond. Jute and wool also have their origins in India. Cashmere, the finest and most exclusive type of wool, actually comes from the Kashmir region of India. Buttons that sit proudly on that cashmere cardigan of yours also have ancient Indian origins. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indus Valley civilization started cutting seashells into geometric shapes with tiny holes in them. First, they were just decorations, but then people started using them to fasten clothes. Now, when you think about radio communication pioneers, Marconi's name usually steals the spotlight. He got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for his groundbreaking radio work. But there's an unsung hero in the radio waves game, and his name is Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. He spilled the beans on radio communication way back in 1895. He shot an electromagnetic wave across 75 feet at the town hall in Calcutta, and it went through walls, rang a bell, and even set off some gunpowder. Marconi took a page from Bose's book, using his invention, the Mercury Coherer, as a blueprint for his own two-way radio. Bose didn't patent his genius creation, so he only got his credit a century later.
How much time passed between the inventions of the first computer and the appearance of the modern one? The first electronic computer in history is the ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. It was invented in 1945 by American scientists. But there's an older machine. It's the Babbage difference engine. English engineer Charles Babbage built it in 1822. This means more than 200 years have passed since the first computer, and we would have thought so if, at the beginning of the 20th century, divers hadn't discovered a computer more than 2,000 years old. In 1900, a group of divers searched for sea sponges in the Mediterranean Sea between the island of Crete and mainland Greece. But instead of sponges, they found sunken treasure ships. It was one of the most significant archaeological finds of that time. At the bottom were Greek marble sculptures and many other artifacts. Among them, divers found a strange piece of stone the size of a large book. They ignored it and put it with other finds in the museum. A few months later, archaeologists began to study the block and discovered that a strange object with bronze gears was hidden inside it. This shocked all scientists because, according to historical data, such things could not exist in ancient Greece. The technologies of that time were not so developed. Scientists started studying this object and realized they had no idea what it was. They called it the Antikythera mechanism, and they had been trying to unravel its purpose for over 100 years. The fragility of the object added complexity. It had been underwater for a millennia. Its internal instruments were damaged, and when scientists touched them, they fell apart. Over many years of research, the object has split into 82 fragments, becoming a real puzzle for scientists worldwide. They found out that it was a machine designed for astronomical calculations. With the help of X-rays, computer tomography, and virtual modeling, people could partially recreate the image of the mechanism. It was a complex structure consisting of 30 rotating gears that turned the dial. The whole mechanism was set in motion with a hand crank. All this was necessary for the ancient Greeks to track the positions of the moon and the sun and calculate the time of eclipses and the Olympic Games. It's as if Silicon Valley was in ancient Greece and the best minds united to create a revolutionary startup. The Antikythera mechanism showed that people in the distant past had excellent knowledge of astronomy and technologies for studying the starry sky. Considering that time, it was not just a machine, but a supercomputer. People entered data into it and got the result after the complex calculations it performed. In 2016, scientists found an inscription on the device containing more than 3,000 symbols. It was something like a manual for use. The text had information about eclipse colors, celestial body movement, and astrological predictions. It was like a reference list of all the events that happened to the planets in the sky. The Greeks realized that all astronomical bodies in the starry sky moved along the same routes. That is, they had orbits close to the plane of motion of our planet around the sun. Ancient astronomers couldn't calculate the path of their movement, so they created the Antikythera mechanism. This was one of its main functions. The researchers found confirmation of this version in the words of the Roman lawyer Cicero. In one of his quotes, there was a mention of a computing machine created by mathematician Archimedes. According to Cicero, the machine could depict the movement of 5 stars called wanderers. At that time, people called celestial bodies that way. Archimedes had lived before the Antikythera mechanism was invented, but perhaps he created the drawings that became the basis of the device. The mechanism worked, and when you turned the handle on it, it rotated the gears in the front and rear parts of the device. And then, the dial showed you the direction of movement of space objects. Besides, the machine had an astronomical calendar inside and tracked the time of sporting events, such as the Olympic Games, and also helped to calculate the exact time of the eclipse. Apparently, the Antikythera mechanism was something like a powerful organizer used by scientists or wealthy citizens of Greece. But what is most unusual is that its creator probably installed the function that changed the observation properties depending on the observer's location. This means that ancient astronomers had to enter different coordinates in different areas for the correct result. NASA computers can do all these things today. These expensive multi-million-dollar devices work with electricity, chips, processors, and thousands of other things. And the ancient Greeks achieved the same result 2,000 years ago with the help of this small device. This changes the idea of the technologies of ancient Greece. People of that time had plumbing and used steam to control some equipment. They were developed, but no one expected them to go so far. Archaeologists were sure that people of ancient times used giant rough gears to operate windmills. And now, it turns out that they could create small and complex mechanisms that modern scientists couldn't figure out for 100 years. Divers continue to study the seabed where the Antikythera mechanism was found. They have already found other items, such as nails from the ship and a bronze ring. Such underwater excavations are dangerous and complicated, so the research takes a long time. Experts think that the Antikythera mechanism was not a single copy. Perhaps the ancient Greeks made the same or similar machines. Maybe they're hidden somewhere or were melted down to create something else. In those days, bronze was a costly metal, so when ancient astronomical computers broke down, people could melt them and sell the metal. Some researchers refer to the Antikythera mechanism as the ancient prototype of all modern devices. Phones, computers, and tablets have something in common with this machine. By the way, have you heard of the odometer device? This device tracks the distance traveled by car or other means of transport. Nowadays, odometers are digital, but this technology used to be mechanical, and the ancient Greeks were the first to invent it. According to some records, Archimedes might have created it. The Roman later adopted this device for use during long journeys to aid in road construction. The ancient Greeks were the first to attempt to understand the rules of geometry. The Babylonians and Egyptians used geometry in different spheres of life. However, the Greeks decided to use logical reasoning to establish the rules and formulas that we still use today. Archimedes observed that when a solid object was immersed in water, it displaced a mass of water equal to the volume of the object. Have you heard of the Hippocratic Oath? This document is read aloud by all doctors before they start practicing medicine. For us, concepts such as confidentiality between a doctor and a patient seem commonplace, as well as a doctor's duty to always try to cure and save people's lives. But all of this was invented by ancient Greek Hippocrates. In addition to the famous oath, he was one of the first to make a scientific leap in medicine. In ancient times, people viewed illnesses as punishment for bad deeds. But Hippocrates discovered that diseases were natural and that the human body could react differently to them. This may seem obvious now, but the ancient Greeks reached this conclusion in 460 BCE. Aristotle was the first to suggest that our planet is a sphere, and thanks to him, we enjoy movies, TV series, and performances. The ancient Greeks invented theater in the form we know it today. Aristotle wrote the first rules of drama in history, which guide directors and screenwriters on how to keep the viewer's attention. Greek writers created plays in various genres, including tragedies, satires, and comedies. All of this contributed to the formation of Western culture, and that's why many directors enjoy staging ancient plays. And this is only a small part of what the Greeks invented. Therefore, it's quite logical that they were able to create the Antikythera mechanism.
If there's a question that still baffles archaeologists to this day, it's this one. How did the ancient Egyptians build those magnificent pyramids? As far as we know today, their resources were quite limited, especially in terms of tools and building materials. We still don't have a fully satisfying answer, but hey, we've got some pretty amazing theories worth considering. The leading contender among these theories involves the clever Egyptians employing a sneaky strategy. Now picture this. They constructed a slanted and curving mound made of bricks, earth, and sand encircling the pyramid to be. As the pyramid grew taller and taller, they simply increased the height and length of this wacky structure. It's like they were playing an ancient game of Jenga. Now, how did they get those massive stone blocks up there? Well, according to the legendary ancient Greek historian Herodotus, they used sleds, rollers, and levers. It sounds like they turned construction into a supersized game of tug-of-war. And guess what? Herodotus also claimed that the Great Pyramid, the one from Giza, the granddaddy of them all, took a whopping 20 years to build. There's more. Herodotus also dropped a mind-boggling number on us. 100,000 men were supposedly involved in this pyramid extravaganza. Did they hire the entire Egyptian population? Well, it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. These men were probably mostly farmers, so they probably focused on the pyramids when there wasn't much work to be done in the fields. You know, like during the flood season of the Nile River. Obviously, specialists in the archaeological community had something to add to this theory. By the late 20th century, they discovered some evidence that suggests the workforce might have been smaller and more permanent than previously thought. Instead of a massive army of 100,000 pyramid builders, they proposed that a modest crew of around 20,000 workers, accompanied by support personnel like bakers, physicians, and even spiritual leaders, could have gotten the job done. There was also this theory that claimed that the pyramids were actually built from the top downward. It suggested that these colossal structures were nothing more than isolated hills used as quarries. The stones were supposedly drawn from these hills, and over time, competing engineers took charge and transformed them into the iconic pyramids we know today. Now, before you dismiss this theory as a wild fantasy, some folks thought it wasn't completely crazy. After all, there are instances where isolated hills exist, so maybe this theory had a tiny glimmer of truth. Whether it involved ramp building or ingenious work schedules, one thing is clear. Those pyramids have definitely left their mark on history and on our imaginations. Now, speaking of ancient Egyptian mysteries, there's this gigantic unfinished obelisk sitting in ancient Egypt, and scientists are trying to figure out how it was shaped. Now, some people suggest that our industrious ancestors used handheld pounders to get the job done. One expert has a different take on the matter, though. He argues that if we take a closer look at the pattern left behind by the shaping tool, we'll notice something peculiar. The walls of the trenches surrounding the obelisk display a neat and even pattern, which is pretty unlikely if they were pounded away by mere mortal hands. According to this expert, those horizontal striations are usually the result of a tool that takes breaks while removing material, leaving its mark on the surface. But wait, there's more. Imagine the tool being rocked back and forth against the trench walls, clearing away the waste to keep the trench from narrowing. Well, in that case, the tool might have left some funky horizontal striations where it was pressed against the sidewall. This sounds like some fancy technology at play, don't you think? And guess what? The dynastic Egyptians probably didn't have access to that kind of know-how. Another famous Egyptologist from way back also uncovered a bunch of core drills during his adventures. Although the actual drill bits are missing, his collection houses these particular core remnants made of limestone, alabaster, and even granite. These constructions aren't the only amazing thing the ancient Egyptians left behind, though. As it turns out, the Egyptians were the genius minds behind the creation of the handheld mirror. Yeah, that little mirror you use every day to check yourself out. But here's the twist. These mirrors are like pieces of art. They were decorated with inscriptions and figures. But that's not all. The Egyptians had a serious concern with their appearance. They knew the importance of personal hygiene and looking fabulous. So, in their quest for pearly whites, they invented toothbrushes and toothpaste. Dental problems were pretty common back then, and their smiles weren't exactly all white. Dentistry wasn't their strongest suit, you see. Maybe their minds were distracted by all that pyramid building. So that doesn't mean those ancient toothpaste recipes weren't amazing. One delightful concoction included rock salt, mint, dried iris petals, and pepper. Some brave dentists in the 21st century tried it out, and it worked pretty well. Ground-up ash was also used in another recipe to create a tooth cleansing paste. Mint was missing, so that didn't do much for their breath. That's when the genius Egyptians came up with the world's first breath mints. They made tablets from heated spices like cinnamon, and they mixed it with honey. Now, let's shift gears to home decor, Egyptian style. They surely took ornamentation to the next level. While the concept of decorating furniture started in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians cranked it up a notch. They went all out with different colors of ink and even developed various weights of paper. Oh, and let's not forget about those cute little area rugs we all have in our homes today. Guess who came up with the idea? Yep, the Egyptians. They used the versatile papyrus plant to make those cozy rugs. And speaking of trends, the Egyptians loved their knickknacks. They had an assortment of small figurines in the shapes of cats, dogs, and people. These statues were made from various materials, like simple sun-dried mud to the ultimate bling of gold. It all depended on how loaded you were. The Egyptians were also all about farming, and they knew that clean water was crucial for their crops and animals. That's why they came up with some nifty inventions and techniques to make sure their land was fertile and their plants were happy. First off, they had the genius idea of using ox-drawn plows. They had two types of plows, heavy and light. The heavy plow would strut its stuff, cutting deep furrows in the soil, while the lighter plow followed behind, fluffing up the earth. But they didn't stop there. After plowing, the Egyptians would break up clumps of soil and sow the rows with seeds. To give those seeds a good old squish into the furrows, they'd march their livestock across the field, effectively closing up the furrows. But hey, all that hard work would be pointless if their seeds were as dry as the Sahara. That's where irrigation comes into play. The Egyptians were so good at it that other cultures, like the Greeks and Romans, couldn't help but copy their techniques. Now let's switch gears and talk about the marvelous architecture of ancient Egypt. These folks weren't just skilled farmers, they were also architectural maestros. They built these fancy canals to carry water to farms and villages, and boy, did they know how to make those canals look pretty. Just imagine strolling along a canal lined with ornate structures. The pharaoh Ramesses the Great was quite the overachiever when it came to construction. One of his mind-blowing creations was the construction located at Abu Simbel. This building was designed so that twice a year, the sun would shine directly into it and illuminate the statues of Ramesses. And let's not forget about the corbelled arch. Without this architectural gem, we'd be missing out on some mind-boggling structures like the Great Pyramid. The Egyptians knew how to make things stand tall and proud, thanks to their engineering and construction wizardry. They built grand halls and inner sanctums that make your jaw drop. And some of these temples doubled as astronomical observatories.
On October 30th, 1759, the inhabitants of the Middle East were jolted awake by an earthquake. Cracks appeared in the walls of their homes, roofs began to crumble. People ran out of their homes and gathered in open areas. But because of strong shocks, they kept losing their footing and falling. A month later, there was another earthquake, but it turned out to be even stronger. Trees broke, houses collapsed, deep cracks appeared in the ground. The disaster lasted for 2 minutes. Oases, roads, and cities were destroyed. Incredibly, Baalbek's ancient buildings withstood earthquakes. Some historians state that this majestic and mysterious place was built during the Roman Empire, but many researchers disagree. Whatever the truth is, the city is one of the main archaeological phenomena of humankind. The most amazing building of Baalbek is the Temple of Jupiter. The inhabitants of the Roman Empire believed that Jupiter held power over lightning and thunder. The building looked like a platform with 54 columns. A massive roof rested on these columns. Today, you can only see 6 70-foot-high columns. Each of them consists of 3 sections and resembles a pencil. The cores of these pencils were made of lead. This made the columns exceptionally strong. Each of these pieces of stone weighed an incredible 80 tons. That's the weight of 35 Ford Explorer SUVs. Look, this is the largest block in the Great Pyramid of Giza. But compared to the blocks from Baalbek, it doesn't even look that impressive. The foundation under the Temple of Jupiter was preserved. That's how specialists figured out it consisted of about 25 monolithic stones, weighing 450 tons each. It means that the blocks from Baalbek weigh almost 4 times more than the blocks from Egypt. There are 3 more enormous limestone blocks in the foundation. They weigh 800 tons each. This is more than twice the weight of a Boeing 747 plane. Ancient builders must have had a hard time carving such giants from a piece of stone. And after that, they also had to pull them to the construction site and lift them to a significant height. Repeating these logistics would probably turn out to be a nightmare for present-day builders. To do this amount of work, they would need modern equipment. But Baalbek's constructors didn't have trucks, cranes with circular saws, or electricity. How did the builders of the past manage to do this? Scientists have a theory that includes ropes, winches, and lever systems. Naturally, the engineers of the past made all the gadgets from wood. Around 3,000 feet away from the ruins of the temple complex, there's a quarry. Archaeologists suppose that's where the stones for the construction were cut. They found a block of limestone there. It seemed to be too large even for this incredible place. The monolith got called the Stone of the South. It was 65 feet long and 13 feet wide. The ancient builders didn't have time to completely separate it from its mother rock. A group of scientists from Austria estimated that this piece of limestone weighed more than 1,000 tons. That's like 3 Boeing aircraft or 160 African elephants. There was another surprise awaiting the archaeologists near the Stone of the South. It was the second monolith that weighed more than 1,200 tons. But the ancient builders didn't stop at that. They continued to work. In 2014, in the same quarry, German archaeologists unearthed a block that weighed 1,650 tons. No one has figured out yet why people of the past needed a piece of stone that weighed as much as 125 school buses. It's also unclear how they were going to move this giant and why they didn't finish the job. In any case, this third monolith is the largest processed piece of stone in human history. There are more questions than answers. Some researchers believe that people of the past had high-tech equipment. Others don't think so, but are eager to understand how the builders managed to move those stones. There's a huge number of ancient buildings and artifacts on the planet. Lots of them make researchers scratch their heads. Near the Pyramid of Djoser in Egypt, archaeologists have found a network of tunnels. This place is called Serapeum. It contains 24 sarcophagi weighing from 70 to 100 tons. The giant boxes are carved from a single piece of granite and covered with heavy lids. The sarcophagi are perfectly symmetrical. To the touch, their walls are as smooth as glass. Even with the current level of technology, this is very difficult to do. But the ancient Egyptians managed this feat. The Lycurgus cup is a priceless artifact and example of ancient nanotechnology. It's made of glass that can change its color. If you put a source of light in front of the cup, it turns green. If the light is behind the goblet, it becomes deep red. In this case, the figure of Greek king Lycurgus turns pale purple. Scientists understood how this color change worked only at the end of the 20th century. Through microscopes, they saw nanoparticles of silver, gold, and copper. They had been added to the glass matrix. Thanks to this, you can observe a color change called dichroism. Interestingly, the gold and silver were grounded into a fine dust. It's almost impossible to do this by accident. Most likely, the ancient experts knew for sure what they were doing. Bolivia has a curious place called Puma Punku. It looks as if an ancient giant played there with an enormous construction set. And after the game, they forgot to put the pieces back into the box. But there are no giants, and the huge stone blocks were carved by ancient builders over 1,500 years ago. Some of the rocks weigh 100 tons. The blocks were brought to an altitude of almost 13,000 feet above sea level from the quarry 60 miles away from the construction site. There's no forest in that area. This means the builders couldn't use trees to make wooden rollers. The monument belongs to the Inca civilization. Scientists are sure they didn't know anything about wheels. In 1992, the inhabitants of a Chinese village decided to drain a pond. Their ancestors had been using it to wash clothes and catch fish for hundreds of years. They kept pumping the water out for 17 days. At the bottom of the reservoir, they made an unexpected discovery. The villagers saw an entrance to a cave going down to a depth of 100 feet. The incredible find was named the Longyu Caves. Unknown builders carved out 320,000 square feet of galleries. There are separate rooms, bridges, pools, and columns that support the ceiling. The walls of the cave are covered with strange carved lines and patterns. Scientists haven't found any information about who built the caves and why they did it. The construction technology also remains a mystery. Antonio Stradivari lived in Italy in the 18th century. He created musical instruments. More than 600 of his works have survived to this day. 500 of them are violins. One of the instruments was sold at auction for $16 million. The violins made by this master sound clear and deep. Researchers can't understand why Stradivarius instruments produce such unique sounds. Perhaps it's all about the varnish the master used to cover the violins. The answer may also lie in the wood the instruments are made of. In those days, Europe had a cold climate. Because of this, the wood became denser, and the instruments made of it sounded especially pleasing to the ear. In the Indian city of Delhi, there's a 23-foot high pole. It weighs 6.5 tons and is made of 98% wrought iron. The 1,600-year-old pillar has no signs of rust or decay. Scientists believe that the monument is so well preserved thanks to the dry weather and the chemical composition of the metal. It might be resistant to corrosion. And still, researchers don't know how the blacksmiths managed to make an iron pillar that's not afraid of rust. It seems like a tough feat, even for modern metallurgists. The Al-Nasla rock is divided into two parts by a perfectly straight slit. Each boulder stands on a small pedestal. Some people believe this is the evidence of ancient laser technology. But geologists think the split happened due to the ground shifting or natural vibrations that occurred under the rock. This process led to the appearance of the crack. It had been deepening for thousands of years, and gradually, the natural monument took the form you can see today.
If you think Neolithic people spent their days hunting and gathering, think again. These Spanish ancestors were out building impossible structures for their time, like the Menga Dolmen. This magnificent stone structure is located in Antequera, a city often called the heart of Andalusia in southern Spain. Andalusia is where Neolithic heritage meets with ancient Roman and Moorish roots, giving us a unique landscape and architecture. The Menga Dolmen is a 5,700-year-old monument, which means it was built when there was very little engineering technology available. It is one out of 3 megalithic structures located in Antequera. The other famous neighboring megalithic sites are the Dolmen del Romeral and the Dolmen de Vieira. But the Menga Dolmen is one of the most interesting ones since it was the first to be built, dating all the way back to approximately 3,800 BCE. Overall, it's 90 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 11 feet high. For years, researchers studied the building's structure, and this is what they found. Let's get one thing clear. Megaliths are structures made of large stones, and they're found all over the world. Most of them were built in late prehistoric Europe, and in this continent, there are over 35,000 megalithic structures. It derives from the ancient Greek words mega, which means great, and lithos, which means stone. The Menga Dolmen was only unearthed around the 1840s, but as soon as it was discovered, it was recognized as a masterpiece for its originality. Let's understand why. The fact that Menga has existed for nearly 6,000 years proves that its builders knew what they were doing. For starters, the mysterious builders of the Menga Dolmen transported its massive stones from the Cerro de la Cruz quarries about a half a mile away from where the dolmen stands. The thing is, the site has 32 absurdly massive stones. Its largest stone is nearly 5 times heavier than Stonehenge's largest stone. Together, they weigh about 1,140 tons, which is about the same as 2 jumbo transatlantic airplanes filled with luggage and passengers. The largest single stone in Menga, known as Capstone C5, weighs around 150 metric tons, which is about the same as a blue whale. Basically, these ancestral workers carried the largest stone ever moved as part of the megalithic phenomenon in Iberia, and the second largest one in France. In case you're wondering, the first place goes to a humongous monolith, weighing 330 tons. That was used to build the Great Broken Menhir in southern Brittany, France. How did they do it though? The first challenge was to carefully select the rocks that would be used to build the structure. According to experts, the builder chose calcarenites and calcarudites, which are considered soft or moderately soft rocks, probably because they would settle into each other more easily with time. Then they had to move these huge monsters. The most plausible guess is that they built a trackway to carry them, using scaffolds, ropes, and gravity itself. This way, they would minimize friction. To carry them downhill, the workers needed to have precise control of their acceleration and a precise notion of the balance point of each rock. Remember we said they used soft rocks, though. This meant they needed to be extremely careful when maneuvering them with ropes. Scientists' main guess is that they also had to build sledges on which to place the rocks. But moving the rocks wasn't their main accomplishment. You see, they designed a structure that would still be standing after centuries. And this is mainly due to the fact that Menga's builders used sophisticated techniques to protect the structure from erosion. In case you don't know, a dolmen is a type of single-chambered megalithic temple or final resting place. Most of them consist of 2 or more upright monoliths that support a large, flat, horizontal capstone or table. Most dolmens date from the late Neolithic period, and they can be found all over the world in places such as Turkey, England, Indonesia, Spain, Brazil, and the list goes on. In the Menga dolmen, researchers say they took extra care to waterproof the whole thing. The upright stones that make up the walls weren't placed straight up, but were actually tilted inward at around an 84 or 85 degree angle, making the whole chamber narrower at the top than the bottom, giving it a trapezoid shape. These stones also leaned sideways against each other, and this wasn't a random choice. The builders probably used some pretty advanced tools like levels and squares to make sure the angles were super precise. One researcher even said it was like building a giant Tetris puzzle where the builder had very little room to make mistakes, since the rocks were so absurdly heavy to move for adjustments. In order for the rocks to be tilted ever so slightly, the builder had to design deep foundation sockets on which to place the rocks. These sockets allowed them to have control of the millimetric positioning of the rocks, so that they would really interlock with one another. The cherry on top was literally the capstones. Once the massive capstones were added on top, the whole thing became a solid box. They carved out the inside from the bedrock beneath it, leaving the walls and roof intact. To protect the chamber, they piled a huge mound of soil over the top, kind of like wrapping the structure in a blanket. This kept the chamber warm and dry and also added extra stability, almost like a natural straitjacket to hold everything together. Oh, and there's another very important detail. The builders aligned the dolmen with the nearby mountains, not only for practical reasons, but also to create intriguing light patterns within the chamber. This alignment proves how much planning went into the construction of the megalith, pointing to the builders' deep connection with astronomy as well. An avid researcher of the site said it's not exactly clear the reason why dolmens were built. Not many relics have been found on site, but many agree that it was probably used as a temple and resting places for important people. That's why they were built to last eternally. The Menga dolmen specifically was built in a seismically active region, so that was another reason for the sturdy structure. It seems that the builders were also thinking of other details as well. From the entrance of the dolmen, one looks directly to the so-called Lover's Rock and the sunrise both at the same time. The Lover's Rock is an important part of local folklore and is a part of the circuit of dolmens from Antikythera, even though it's not a megalithic structure. The Lover's Rock supposedly got that name after an enamored couple threw themselves from the top of the mountain, since they were forbidden to be together in this lifetime. A classic Romeo and Juliet true life story, if you will. The Menga dolmen is also astronomically aligned, like most dolmens around the world are. During the summer solstice, there is a specific part of the day when the sun enters the dome, illuminates the right side, and leaves the left side completely in the shadows. They had to think of the dolmen's exact precision so that that would happen, you know. And speaking of folklore, while some cultures say that these impressive dolmens were built by a little gray people from other planets, Iberian culture has another guess. In local legends, some speak of the so-called enchanted muras, which were fairy-like creatures. These beings were known to be earth elementals, extremely beautiful, seductive, and powerful in their own rights. One of their main gists was building dolmens, where they would hide and practice their own ceremonies. There is a lot of reference to these beings in local lore, so hey, it's worth a mention. Either way, it's no wonder UNESCO decided to name it one of its National Heritage Sites. It's a true ancient masterpiece. Deep inside the heart of the Amazon rainforest lies a cave so massive, it defies logic. Stretching for 2,000 feet, this tunnel is so big a human could easily walk around inside of it. Its walls are etched with deep, mysterious claw marks. But this is just one of many. If you travel to the south of Brazil, you'll stumble upon over 1,500 similar caves, ranging from modest tiny burrows to massive passageways. These are not your average spooky, bat-filled caverns. They're what researchers call paleo burrows, also known as ancient underground structures dug by creatures so colossal they make modern elephants look small. Whatever creature dug those tunnels displaced 800 elephants worth of dirt. I know, it still looks like a normal cave, but experts noticed this one was special because the walls were too neat and rounded, and the floor was too smooth. Besides, no water or erosion leaves such signs of serious digging power. These Brazilian caves are the largest geological records of animal activity on the planet. It's like stumbling into a prehistoric house made by creatures the size of cars. To unlock this mystery, researchers analyzed the scratch marks on the walls and realized they had probably been made by giant ground sloths, a species called valgipes, which could weigh nearly 9,000 pounds and eat your average annual menu in about 3 days. Despite being huge, these animals were not earthbenders. They had to work in groups if they wanted to dig such long tunnels. This is why scientists believe many sloths shared the same tunnel and dug it together. Even some giant armadillos may have helped with the digging. After all, they were ridiculously skilled excavators and lived there too. Okay, but why would a giant sloth or armadillo need a 2,000-foot-long underground lair? Great question. And the truth is, scientists aren't totally sure. It doesn't make sense for them to dig tunnels this massive just to escape predators, especially since the tunnels were big enough for a saber-toothed tiger to crawl in, for example. So, unless they installed prehistoric security systems, this theory has holes. Haha, pun intended. The best bet is probably climate. Back then, everything was drier and colder, and some species of giant sloths were living their best lives back when Earth was transitioning between cold and warmer periods. Their big bodies usually protected these animals from temperature changes, but drastic fluctuations probably made them hide in order to survive. Besides, just like modern sloths, giant sloths probably had a hard time maintaining their body temperature, and going underground for a while is a great way to protect your babies and save some energy. After all, the bigger you are, the more energy you spend. Some scientists believe these tunnels might have had rotating tenants. One sloth moves in, digs a bit, leaves some scratch marks, moves out. And sometime later, another one crashes there and adds its own decor touches. A hostel for ancient megafauna. All evidence points to a more timeshare situation than a prehistoric private property. After all, these creatures weren't exactly social butterflies. Most sloths and armadillos usually keep things strictly one-on-one, just mom and baby. Yeah, dad sloth stuck around only for the good part. But you probably noticed one tiny detail here. These guys are not around anymore. They went extinct 11,000 years ago, right around the time humans started to get popular on Earth, when another ice age was ending. In fact, 80% of all mammals that were heavier than 2 pounds disappeared then. The first culprit is, of course, the usual suspect: humans. Around 10,000 years ago, a wave of skilled hunters using distinctive tools like spear points spread across North America. The theory goes that American animals weren't used to this new predator, making them easy targets. Once the big plant eaters started vanishing, the big meat eaters followed. They didn't have enough food to survive, and it wasn't just excessive hunting that caused some damage. early humans may have also harmed ecosystems in ways that made survival harder for large species. But wait, there's another suspect: climate change. Around the same time, Earth's climate got a major shakeup. The climate was going from super cold to only slightly cold. Just so you know, Earth's temperature was about 46 degrees Fahrenheit, making seasons change and plants perish. And if plants are no longer around, big animals that eat them, like our friends giant sloths, have less nutrition, making them even more vulnerable. Many scientists now think that both human impact and climate change played a role, just in different ways depending on the region. In some places, humans may have tipped the balance. In others, nature itself did the job. Either way, it was a perfect storm that ended the age of giants. Turns out, being huge isn't always a plus. Giant animals tend to live longer and reproduce slowly, which makes them sitting ducks when disaster strikes. Besides, it takes a long time for these guys to bounce back. After dinos disappeared, for example, it took 15 million years for new mega mammals to stomp onto the scene. The last major extinction happened around 12,000 years ago. Not really enough time for brand new massive beasts to evolve. Today's biggest ground animals, like elephants, rhinos, and bison, aren't newcomers. They're actually the tough survivors of that ancient chaos. And, well, at least we still live alongside the blue whale, the biggest mammal ever. But why did some prehistoric animals get so gigantic in the first place? Well, being big has some perks, in spite of all the extinction thing. It keeps you safe from predators and helps you win the fight for food. If plant eaters bulked up, predators had to level up too, just to keep up. And the environment plays a big role. You see, cold-blooded animals might grow bigger in hot places to stay cool, and warm-blooded giants thrive in cold places to stay warm. One paleontologist even suggested that some dino-sized vegetarians needed those massive bellies just to digest the tough, woody plants of their time, as if they had a salad bar inside their bodies. There's also the thing with oxygen. Back then, Earth's atmosphere had way more of it. That's a big deal, especially for creatures with less efficient breathing systems like insects. Higher oxygen levels meant their bodies could handle more growth and more activity, kind of like nature's turbo mode. We also have to discuss bones, specifically the lighter ones. Many huge dinosaurs had air sacs built into their skeletons, just like modern birds. This made their bones strong but not ridiculously heavy, meaning they could grow super tall or long without collapsing under their own weight. Those air sacs also helped with cooling down, which is super important when you're basically a walking oven of muscle. On the flip side, modern mammals are limited by gravity and biology. Bigger bodies need stronger hearts, lungs, and blood pressure just to keep functioning, and land doesn't offer much support. This also explains why whales got even bigger than dinosaurs. The ocean acts like a natural support system, which pretty much means that buoyancy helps hold up all that mass. So blue whales can hit a jaw-dropping 330,000 pounds without turning into pancakes. On land, that kind of size would be a serious health hazard. So ancient giants weren't just freaks of nature. They were the result of the right mix of air, food, physics, and environment working together in just the right way. The whole extinction event surely is a bummer for giant sloths that worked as gigantic engineers of nature, but it surely prevented us from sharing the planet with insects the size of crows, like some types of griffinflies or millipedes reaching almost 6 feet in length. Yikes! Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to appreciate modern sloths. Slow, small, and thankfully incapable of terraforming the landscape and giving me insect-related panic attacks. Over the years, archaeologists have uncovered all kinds of stuff on runestones, curses, poems, protective magic spells, and even inheritance disputes. However, a newly uncovered ancient Norse artifact known as Svingerud stone has just one word on it. Sounds boring, right? Well, think again, because this might just be the oldest runestone ever discovered. almost 2,000 years old. But that's not all. Excavations are still ongoing, and depending on what follows next, it could unravel secrets and the true meaning behind the mysterious magical runes. So let's explore and see just how much known history you can rewrite with only one engraved word on a stone. A long time ago, during the first few centuries of the Common Era, Scandinavians and Romans crossed paths. They traded goodies like glass and silver, and eventually, Roman customs and even written culture ended up north. The Nords liked the Roman alphabet but wanted their own letters copyrighted, so they decided to create their own unique characters, which they called runes. Almost 20 centuries later, in 2021, archaeologists were excavating an Iron Age burial site near the village of Svingerud in eastern Norway. Among the cremation graves, they uncovered a reddish sandstone slab that would become a centerpiece in a major Norwegian archaeological discovery. It's the size of a coffee table, measuring just over 12 inches across. The stone was found buried with burned bones and charcoal, part of an early cremation grave. The stone had runes engraved into it, looking rough and shallow, like they were scratched with the tip of a knife or something needle-like. Runestones are not unusual. Archaeologists are used to uncovering runic inscriptions, especially in this region. However, tests show that both the burial site and the carving on the stone likely date back to somewhere between the 1st and 3rd centuries. That places it deep in pre-Viking history, centuries before the Viking Age officially began around 800 CE. That makes it one of the oldest reliably dated examples of early writing in Scandinavia. When you look at these carvings, they either look like magical symbols made to call on Nordic deities to help you, or like random scratches made by an angry man hitting a stone with something sharp. But these are real letters, crude but intentional. It's an ancient writing system used by Germanic tribes across Northern Europe. They were engraved into wood, bone, or stone. Their shapes are straight, angular lines because curves were tough to carve with the tools they had back then. When they met with the Roman Empire, rather than just borrowing Latin letters, the Germanic tribes took the idea of writing and carved out their own version. The original alphabet was called Elderfuthark. It had 24 letters. We can find them on artifacts dating from around the 2nd to the 8th century CE. Its name comes from its first 6 letters: F, U, Th, A, R, and K. Each rune probably had a name that matched the sound it made. For example, the rune that sounds like A was called Anzus. However, nobody from back then left us a memo explaining the names. In fact, the knowledge of how to read them was forgotten until 1865, when Norwegian linguist Sophus Bugge deciphered them by comparing clues. He examined later rune alphabets and ancient poems that referenced the runes, like a detective sketching a suspect from scattered witness clues. For many runes, especially the oldest ones in the Elderfuthark, the meaning is still open to interpretation. They weren't common knowledge, which is reflected by the fact that only some 350 surviving inscriptions remain. This changed eventually when the Scandinavian language evolved from Proto-Norse into Old Norse, spoken by mighty Vikings. The Elderfuthark was reduced from 24 to 16 runes to reflect the changes in the language, thus becoming the Younger Futhark, which was far better spread. Runes weren't really used to write books or keep daily records. Instead, you'd find them carved on gravestones, weapons, and various tools. It's believed that people used runes to show ownership, honor loved ones who had passed away, leave short messages, or sometimes for protection or magic. In the early days, some runes probably had special spiritual or ritual meanings too. One interesting fact about runestones specifically is that they were often used for self-promotion or boasting, like an ancient social media status or a tweet posted on a wall, or better said, a stone. One such example of a runestone from the 11th century where a man named Vigmund had it carved for himself, calling himself the cleverest of men. He even added that he was a ship captain, and yes, he made sure everyone knew that while he was alive. In the Old Norse poem Havamal, Odin says he hung on the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by a spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. This goes to show just how powerful and mystical those symbols were perceived to be. It's fitting that the word rune comes from a Proto-Germanic word which can be translated as secret or whisper. There's a common saying about power being in words, and for the old Germanic tribes, that power felt like actual magic. It's also why it's important to know when this magic came to be. And the Svingerud runestone tells us that. But it's not just when it was written, it's also what's written on it, where and why. The location where the Svingerud stone was discovered is already a significant archaeological site. It's famous for its incredible discoveries, including the remarkable Jormunbu helmet, the only Viking helmet ever found in Norway. The stone was placed in a cremation pit, alongside the remains of an adult and a few personal items. Thanks to charcoal and bone samples, researchers can figure out how old the runestone is by using a method called radiocarbon dating. The Svingerud stone isn't the first ancient Norse artifact with runes that archaeologists have discovered, not even close. People carved runes into all sorts of everyday objects like combs, jewelry, and knives long ago. Some of those might even be just as old. Other finds have runes, but they're often broken, loose, or don't have clear dating. However, with radiocarbon dating, scientists have confirmed that the Svingerud stone is really the oldest runestone ever found. The writing on it suggests that it was part of a ritual and might have even been a message to the deceased. The inscription isn't long. It's just one word, Idiburg. No one knows exactly what it means. The clearest part says Idibera, and most researchers agree it's probably a name. Maybe Idibera in a genitive form, meaning of Idibera or belonging to Idibera. So this could be the name of the person buried there or someone being honored. There's a decent chance it's a female name, possibly making this the earliest known female rune inscriber in history. But researchers now believe that the Svingerud runestone is a part of a bigger monument. They found more than a dozen sandstone pieces scattered across several graves at the site, and when they assembled them in the lab, they fit together like a puzzle. This suggests they all came from one single upright stone. The main piece with the inscription was found in one grave, but other similar pieces were buried in nearby cremation pits. Archaeologists think it was broken and reused in a ritual, maybe to connect different people or generations who had been buried there. Instead of just marking one grave, it might have first been a memorial and was later put back into the other graves as a symbolic act. Some even speculate that the runes might have been carved by different hands throughout various time periods. The Svingerud stone might be small, but as the oldest runestone ever found with a secure archaeological context, it could be the key to how writing first took root in Northern Europe. This Norwegian archaeological discovery proves that runes were already tied to ritual, memory, and maybe even women. And if it's just a fragment of a larger monument, we've only seen part of the picture. Ancient Norse artifacts like this reshape what we know about pre-Viking history. And with luck, more runestones will follow, maybe even from another female rune inscriber. In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the Sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapeum of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapeum was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision, with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. If a bull had these signs, they believed it was chosen by Ptah and treated it like royalty. The chosen bulls lived in a special temple in Memphis, the city where they worshipped Ptah. They received the best care and offerings from visitors who wanted their blessings. When an Apis bull passed away, it was treated with great honor and mummified. When Mariette entered the Serapeum, he noticed traces of rollers on the gallery's floor and found 2 wooden horizontal winches. Each had 8 levers. Later, other explorers saw double rails. The burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor. To get the boxes into place, workers filled the chambers with sand so the sarcophagi could be rolled in straight. Then they slowly removed the sand to gently lower the boxes into perfectly cut spaces in the bedrock. A carved stone sign found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days to move just one sarcophagus and its lid into its spot during the time of Ptolemy II. The extreme precision of the sarcophagi with 90-degree angles also has an explanation. Ancient Egyptians wrote texts, or rather, papyrus, on geometry a long time ago. It shows that they knew the approximate number pi and could calculate the volume of a pyramid with its top cut off. If they could figure out complicated math like that back then, it makes sense that they could also carve perfectly flat surfaces 500 years later. All this sounds pretty legit, but some people think certain things don't add up here. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapeum are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow, they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty, and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed, so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids.
So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Mariette discovered in the 1850s. They opened the Serapeum for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Chineta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car.